Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Behind the Deep State. I am your host, Alex Newman, senior editor at The New American. It's a great honor to be with you again today. Folks, about 6 years ago, I did a whole episode of this program on the situation in South Africa, the claims of genocide against the Afrikaner people, the farm murders, the expropriation, the communism, the ruthless attacks on farmers of European descent across the nation, and also just the crazy stuff that the communists and their ANC puppets were doing. And that video was very popular, went all over the place before YouTube took our channel away. Well, when we started talking about this, my colleague Bill Jasper back in the 80s started warning about what was going to happen to South Africa if the communists took over. Nobody paid attention. We started warning in 2012. We did a cover story, Genocide and Communism Threaten South Africa. Still, people didn't really pay much attention. Well, here we are in 2025, and Donald Trump has just made this front page news around the world. Did he get every single little detail of every fact correct? Not according to the fact checkers, but that's really beside the point. The main essence of what he had to say was absolutely on target. And now the whole world is talking about it. Joining us to discuss this topic is a man I've known for years. I read his book, AmaBhulu, The Birth and Death of the Second America, many years ago, and I was so impressed by it. I read tons of books, if you guys know me. I was so impressed by it, but that I decided to write a book review about it for the New American Magazine. I encourage you to start there if you're not familiar with this story. Eventually, you ought to get a copy of the book, and no, Harry did not pay me to say that, but it's a really, really good book, and it has very, very clear implications for Americans. In fact, he calls it the Second America because we are so closely related to our Afrikaner cousins on the southern tip of Africa that we are they are basically the second America. Dr. Harry Booyens, welcome to the program. It's just great to have you with us once again.
Thank you very much, Alex. Great to be here.
Appreciate it. So, Harry, we didn't talk about this in advance, but I would love to know your thoughts about what happened in the Oval Office just recently with President Donald Trump and President Cyril Ramapoza. What was your thoughts on that very interesting interaction?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. The one is I reckoned that the lady reporter who piped up with the question, President Trump, what will it take you to believe there's not a genocide? She was a plant. She's there just to ask that question. And from the accent, I assumed she was a South African reporter. John Steenhuisen, who was referred to by Ramapoza as, have you met my, he's talking to Trump and he says, have you met my white Minister of Agriculture? Of course, John Steenhuisen is actually the leader of the supposed opposition. But to me, to be very honest, he's a professional opposition leader. I think he and the top brass of his party pray day in and day out that they never actually get a majority because they might actually have to do something. You've got politicians like that in the States as well. You know them, and we have some of them here in Canada. You know, God forbid they should ever be elected because they'd have to do something. So John Steenhuisen was there as the token white in the cabinet, so to speak. As for Johan Rupert, he is, of course, staggeringly rich and is one of the grouping of people who originally paid off the ANC in 1993. Either him or his father, as the case may be. I met the father, shook hands with him. He was receiving, he was the chair of our university on the night that I graduated, so I shook hands with him. But the Ruperts are sort of, to me, in the same category as the Rothschilds. They live in that world. I am seriously unimpressed with Rupert's comments at that point. Now, as to the matter of President Trump, yes, he got some of the details wrong. For example, the white crosses that he referred to are not graves. They are memorial crosses along a highway. And no, some people have told me that was from the Congo. No, it was not. It's from northern Natal province, the interior part of Natal. As one can tell by the yellow grass in some in that part of the year. And of course, I have to watch out that I don't get too sarcastic. It doesn't go down well with American audiences. But let me know when you find stretches of grass veld in the Congo, which is known to everybody as the major jungle of the earth. You do not get scenes of highways with parked trucks and farmers' light trucks and things next to White Cross memorials. I assure you that scene was from northern Natal because I had that video ages ago. That video comes from some years ago. So any attempts to dismiss that are just stupid. They'll be so easily disproven, you can't believe it. He did show one picture which I just very briefly made out of people in white outfits. As a scientist, we used to call those monkey suits that you use in a semiconductor clean lab or in medical situations. Okay, so some guys in white suits, hazard suits, that was not from South Africa. That indeed was from a mass grave or something that was dug up somewhere outside South Africa. So whoever gave him that picture...
Harry, let's go to the substance of his comments, yeah. Harry, if we can.
Sure.
Is there a genocide against the Afrikaner people? Are farmers in particular being targeted, and why?
Farmers in particular are being targeted for a fact. I'm going to stop one step short of calling it an outright genocide, but it certainly is on Greg Stanton's scale of genocide. It's at least a 7, and for the farmers, I believe it's an 8. I believe it is an effort to exterminate the farmers.
Harry, clarify, because a lot of people are not familiar with Gregory Stanton's genocide scale. So what is stage 7? What is stage 8?
Okay, so he's got roughly 10 stages. I think that the 10th is actually denial of the genocide. The 9th is the actual destruction physically of the people. And the 8th is where they are being exterminated or killed. Okay, and 7 is lining up for it. So I think white people in general in South Africa are being lined up for it, but the farmers in particular are right there. Okay, they fear for their lives. They are daily in danger. They are daily being killed. And I'm not going to call it already at the final stage of genocide, but I am going to tell you that we need a word for what to call it when at least 1/10 of the original people there have been killed. I mean, there's 30,000 farmers left and more than 3,000 have been killed. What do you call that? The Romans called it decimation. So they're at the very least being decimated. They're fleeing their farms. To me, that's ethnic cleansing. So we are somewhere above decimation, somewhere in the vicinity of ethnic cleansing, and probably just short of the final stages of genocide. I'm not sure what to call that. I'm trying to be reasonable by saying it's not quite there where people are lined up in front of trenches and shot through the head. Okay? But it's starting to feel like it.
Yeah, if this isn't stopped, and I do want to talk about the expropriation without compensation. They formally announced that. It was approved by the parliament. They're already saying we're going to steal your land. We're not going to give you anything. But do you think if there is no intervention, if something doesn't stop this, it's eventually going to end up with that actual extermination where people are actually lined up against a trench and shot?
No, I don't think it's got to be necessary for them to do that. The Western world is so complicit in this whole exercise that it's not necessary. This is not like Germany, where the Germans had to hide what they were doing from the rest of the Western world. This is so supported by many in the West that they can just go ahead and openly kill them off until there's none left. They don't have to line them up in front of trenches.
I kind of noticed that narrative, Harry. When Trump did this in the Oval Office, it was kind of like, well, that's not true. But even if it is true, who cares? Apartheid, and they're getting what's coming to them.
Yes.
So I want to dig into this more deeply, because you have done a more in-depth and accurate, I think, historical presentation of what led up to this in your book than anything else I've read. And I've read many, many books on this. I used to live in South Africa. So let's get into a little bit about the why before we get into the history of it. Why is this happening? Why do we have Julius Malema, the former leader of the ANC Youth League, now the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters Party, chanting, kill the Boer, kill the farmer? Why did we have Jacob Zuma, the former president of the Republic of South Africa, the then president at the time, screeching, bring me my machine gun, we're going to shoot all the Boers? The Boers being, of course, the Afrikaans word for farmer, but also the identifiable people group. Why are they doing this? What is the motivation? What is the source of this incredible hatred?
Well, the interesting thing about this, the way to look at it, I think, is take a look at Malema. He wasn't really subject to any significant apartheid policies. He's too young.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Zuma, the previous president, at least he could claim that he saw some years of it. And Ramapoza, I mean, he's done financially brilliantly out of all of this. So the end thing is that they know they are failing at running the country. They know that. They're not that stupid. They realize they're failing at it. So what they're doing is they're pointing at the white people, knowing that there's this incredible liberal guilt in the Western world. So they point at the white South Africans and they blame them for everything that's gone wrong in that country. And they work up the uneducated population against the white people in that process. And why are they uneducated? Because the ANC, who is today the government, had a slogan, that, I forget what the word was, basically revolution before education, right? Mm-hmm. So they didn't think education was important, so they started breaking down the entire educational system. So they've ensured that their population is uneducated. They've made sure that they're unemployable. And because these folks don't have the background to question anything, they're easily whipped up against white people. And that's what's going on. The white folks are being made the scapegoat. And to a lesser degree, the U.S. is seeing that. If you look around the world, I've said previously, and in my book, I've said that South Africa was to Africa what the U.S. was to the world. And so what's happening in South Africa is what, on a slow burner, is being done to folks in the U.S.
Yeah, that was probably the most profound insight I got from your book, Harry, where the parallels, the similarities. I've been calling what's happening to the Afrikaners a microcosm of what these global tyrants have planned for Amerikaners, the Americans, if we're not careful here. And it's really very serious, folks. This is not just some problem that is happening on the other side of the world. This is something that is going to affect all of us if we don't understand it. Harry, there's so many things I want to ask you about, and we have so little time. We're going to probably have to do a follow-up episode at some point. I want to ask you about the Christianity issue. I mean, I know a lot of people in South Africa identify as Christians, but the Afrikaners, very much like the Amerikaners, fled persecution in Europe. They were deeply impacted by the Protestant Reformation. And historically, they've had views on government and culture and society that have been more in line with kind of the Bible, Old Testament theology, basically the same ideas that took root in America and led to the creation of the United States of America. Do you think that plays a role? I mean, it's kind of like this little outpost of Western Christian civilization in Africa that stands as a bulwark against the progress of communism and tyranny.
You know, the majority of black people in South Africa are self-professed Christians. Okay? On the ground in the country, if you look at the dealings between individual white people and individual black people, you don't run into this stuff of people dancing on stages yelling, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer." Okay?
That's right.
On my visits to South Africa, I found that the black people were incredibly helpful, very friendly. I thought it was great. But there's this incredible dichotomy that you have a government of ANC black people, and they run the place. They have usurped all power, and they've stolen the country blind. There is no institution or structure that can be trusted anymore. You cannot trust the roads. You cannot trust that there'll be electricity. You cannot trust the water. There is nothing that's working right anymore. People have up to 6 hours of lack of electricity a day in many places. Mm-hmm. And, but you don't see this hatred on the ground between black and white. You could have looked, for example, at the time of the events at Senekal when there were demonstrations by white farmers. Black people joined in, holding signs, saying, "Stop killing the Boer." Mm-hmm. So it's not fundamentally
so it's coming from the top,
a black-white thing. It's coming from the top. Right. It's absolutely driven from the top, but you need to know that they have a plan that they still inherited from the old Soviet system in which they were educated. The guys at the top of the ANC were all Soviet educated. And so, they going along with, if you don't have something that you can call the masses, then take away from them and run them into the ground until you have your masses that you can order about and control. Okay? And it's all about the guys at the top setting the guys at the very bottom against the guys in the middle. And that particular trick is as old as all history. Except in our case, it has this overtone of a communist schlenter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting that you point that out, and you do delve into that in the book, and we have done a lot of reporting on that in the New American Magazine, that so many of the leaders of the ANC were also card-carrying members of the South African Communist Party, and incidentally, the South African Communist Party was basically a tentacle of the Soviet Union, and they've been pursuing what they call the National Democratic Revolution. They're now, of course, in the second phase of that revolution, where they just kind of take everything. And so, Harry, we've only got like 9 minutes left, and I really want to spend some time on it goes so quickly, but I want to spend some time on solutions. Donald Trump, of course, has signed an executive order now facilitating immigration of Afrikaners as refugees into the United States, and some have already started arriving. There are, of course, right before we started recording, I was speaking with Jack Miller, one of the leaders of the Cape Independence Movement. They want the Western Cape to secede from the Republic of South Africa.
Correct.
You've got Orania, kind of a little Afrikaner community out in the desert, just a few thousand people trying to preserve Afrikaans as a language, Afrikaans cultural institutions. And, of course, they are under attack. But from your perspective, just your opinion, What is the way forward here? Is there a good way forward? Should Afrikaners move to the United States? I mean, you moved out of South Africa, of course, like so many others did. What's the best way forward?
Well, realistically, you cannot move all of them out of South Africa. I'm incredibly thankful to President Trump for opening the door for Afrikaners to flee, particularly for farmers who have got, what must they do? They're being murdered like flies. What must they do? But you cannot move, millions and millions of people that way. So there has to be another solution. And to my mind, the solution is in a lovely map that the CIA produced in the 1970s that shows a curve running through the country separating the West from the East. That curve happens to coincide roughly with a 350 millimeter rainfall line. To the east, there's tall grass. You can keep cattle, which is the basis of black culture. There's cattle. They herd cattle. They're not agricultural people. They're cattle people. And to the west, you had dry country, which was good for sheep and goats and so forth, and maybe a handful of cattle here and there. So historically, and up to the latest elections, you can still see the split, with the whites and the coloreds largely in the west and the black people largely congregated in the east. That's not to ignore the fact that Johannesburg, Pretoria, Bloemfontein, Durban, all very big cities, are essentially on the wrong side of that line. But there is a distinct line supported by history, supported literally by geography, supported literally by the demographics that say, cut the country in half along that line. It means the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, and a piece of the Eastern Cape. That should be a separate country. In my mind, it should be called the Republic of the Cape of Good Hope. It will be a Western country like any other Western country. Its majority language will be Afrikaans. English will be a close second. It will be largely Christian, but with totally free religious convictions everywhere, and certainly with free enterprise. To the east of that line, if you leave it alone, it will simply turn into the People's Republic of Azania, and they will simply die from starvation in the end until they learn the lessons that Ghana learned. Ghana today is one of the examples for Africa about how to pull yourself straight after messing up on every front. The South African black population, as led by the ANC, note I said as led by the ANC, okay, hasn't even begun to learn the first lesson that Ghana has learned. So they ought to be sent on a boot camp exercise to Ghana to go and learn. And they should be simply economically cut off by the US, and the US should support the splitting of that country into West and East. So if President Trump wants to do something of long-lasting status in that country, he should recognize the West as an independent country. And you wouldn't believe how quickly that thing will fix itself up, because at this point, a massive fraction of the taxes gathered in the West are going to supporting the people in the East, which is where all the resources are. They have everything you could dream of in the East, and they can't handle it. They just can't handle it, and that's the ANC.
Harry, I hate to cut you off. We've just got so little time, and I have to ask you this question because I think Americans are going to be very curious. We've alluded several times to the parallels between what's happening in South Africa and what is happening in the United States. It seems like we have a brief reprieve maybe under President Trump, but under Obama, under Biden, these things were really showing themselves. Talk a little bit about those parallels. What can Americans learn from what happened in South Africa, from what's happening now in South Africa?
Well, the way I've pointed out to people is that why have I been so accurate in predicting stuff? And it's not because I'm clairvoyant. I'm not. I don't have access to special information, okay? And I'm definitely not uniquely intelligent. My wife is more clever than me. I can prove that. She beats me at chess every time. So there must be something else. And the answer is, I grew up in South Africa. I saw it all, and I can smell it a mile away. And I smell it in the US and in Canada. Okay? I predicted that the statues and things would be torn down. Why? Not because I'm clairvoyant, but because it already happened in Cape Town. Okay? And these things, all these things that you see happening in South Africa are communicated from there via places like the Black Students Council at California universities, particularly the Berkeley campus. You can actually trace the communication from one step to the next. So when you see something happen in South Africa, you can stencil underneath it, coming to a cinema near you, courtesy of Berkeley.
That's amazing. And I remember that. You actually predicted when the statues were falling in South Africa, you said that's going to be happening in the United States. And like clockwork, we started seeing it, including statues of our founding fathers. Many people that have been heroes to generations of Americans are now...
My comment is the United States is connected to South Africa by the umbilical. You're going to have to get used to that. Okay?
Right. Yep. And as you point out in your book, our history's kind of diverged. The Afrikaners fought against the British Empire and lost. We Amerikaners fought against the British Empire and won. Thankfully, we were able to control our own destiny. But Harry, I do want to end with a recommendation again that people get a copy of your book. It's called AmaBhulu, The Birth and Death of the Second America. AmaBhulu is Harry's tribe, Harry's people group, as referred to in the African tongues down there. The Afrikaners, essentially. The nation that was forged down there from the mix of the Dutch and the French Huguenots and the Danes and everybody else who came down there. Harry, you also have a website. It is hbooyens.wordpress.com.
It's way easier. Just take the word AmaBhulu and shove it into Google and you get a long string of things. The website's in there, the book's in there, everything's in there. It's like I essentially own the word AmaBhulu. Which is it's nothing other, it's just simply the Ramapoza Mandela's people. It's their word for the white Afrikaners.
Yep. And folks, it's spelled, for those of you who are listening to us and not watching us, I know we have it up on the screen for viewers, but it's spelled AMA capital BHUHU or LU. So there's an H in there after the B. AmaBhulu. Harry, this has been very educational. We could have gone on for hours. Folks, we're just scratching the surface of the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more. The book that Harry wrote is told through the perspective of his family that started arriving down there back in the 1600s on the Cape. It is really an incredible resource from somebody who knows his stuff. Harry, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope we can get you back again very soon.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, sir. That's all we have time for today, ladies and gentlemen. But I do want to encourage you to get informed on this topic. Again, it's not some faraway problem. It is our future as Americans if we're not careful in all of this. So thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in. Go to thenewamerican.com for much more. I'm Alex Newman, senior editor at the New American Magazine. And until next time, God bless you all.
Remember when the only uncertainty in news was the weather forecast? Now, our world is clouded by half-truths, misdirection, and gaslighting. The deluge of lies from leftist activists posing as journalists is unrelenting. At The New American, we hold fast to the timeless truths of our founders. Sanctuary in the storm. Visit thenewamerican.com today and get 25% off your subscription.